Hello and welcome to the Godot community. My name is Sahira Dean. I'm the virtual PLC lead for high school 2D art. In today's webinar, we're going to be talking about ways that we as art teachers in the classroom can impact students. So this cool little chart shows the different ways that the arts can help students. And of course, these are things that a lot of art teachers know, but maybe some art teachers don't know. So of course it helps to problem solve, think about the different projects that you have. You're kind of almost presenting them with a problem that they have to tackle through art composition planning and things like that. Helps them to self-direct, helps them to be socially responsible, be fluent in technology, helps them to organize. And this is one thing that I don't think a lot of art teachers realize, especially students that are not as organized, papers everywhere and things like that. In my classroom, I have everyone keep a portfolio, so everything has to go in the portfolio. For my intro to art class, of course, when it gets into 3D projects, they're given a bin, so they even have to keep their materials in a bin. So it helps to get them in the habit of just keeping their materials together, thinking about where they're placing things, not just throwing them anywhere, or even not relying on me to keep up with all their things. And of course, it helps them to be creative. If you think about, when they are sitting next to their peers, they kind of feed off each other, they bounce ideas off each other. You're showing them and exposing them to different artists and materials and techniques and things like that. And of course, they bring their own ideas into the classroom, but they take that knowledge that you empower them with and spin it in different creative ways, which is always a fascinating thing for me to see as a teacher. Helps them to communicate. So not only visually communicate, but if you think about art critiques that you have where they're using, the steps of art criticism, they're reading a painting or an artwork, you're talking about different experiences that they might have had that might remind them of that particular work. So it definitely helps them to communicate in different ways. Collaboration and helping them to cooperate. A lot of times your more difficult students are found in an art classroom for this particular reason. So definitely embrace that as a teacher. I know sometimes it can be difficult when you get a difficult roster of students, but a lot of those students, in my experience, have been the students I've most connected with. I think because we spend a little more time with them, talking to them and things like that in the classroom, in the hallways and things like that, maybe even getting to know their parents sometimes. Save this little chart if you can for future reference. And of course, the list can probably go on and on about what the arts do, but these are just some important things and takeaways in terms of what the arts can do. So the arts allow multiple outcomes. Now, the artwork that I'm showing on all these slides actually is one visual verbal journal prompt that they had to do, where they had to take a word and essentially, and I gave them a list of words, and if they were like stuck on my list, they could come up with their own. But they had to take that word and essentially talk about or visually express what it meant to them. So just to kind of piggyback off of and really kind of showcase how the arts can show or allow multiple outcomes, you'll notice in the slides on the screen. So you think about all the projects that you have. A lot in my class, I'll present, of course, maybe a medium, or I'll show some student examples, just about composition successes and things like that. And we'll talk before we actually start the project about what makes it successful, and not in a way to allow them to copy, which, I enforce or strongly emphasize not copying, but it's more so to demonstrate how other students have answered the particular problem, art problem, that I've presented them with. So the arts do allow multiple outcomes. The arts force student inquiry. So it forces them to ask questions. And it also encourages students to seek out different meanings. So this can be, through, well, what happens if I mix chalk with oil pastel, right? And you say, well, one's chalk, one's oil, maybe it will mix, maybe it won't mix, that kind of thing. But it enforces them, if they have that question, I allow them, extra paper or whatever, extra time to do some of that experimentation. If they're thinking about different periods in time, where that art was created, and they look at the date, they're able to make connections with, oh, well, this was going on at that particular time in history. So maybe that's why this artist created that. Or, the list can go on. In terms of seeking out different meanings, they're able to make connections with things that they've experienced, the movies they've seen, books they've read, that kind of thing. So it definitely encourages students to ask questions. And that can be through, maybe a notebook that you keep or that a student keeps, or actually an actual conversation that you have with the student. Art also encourages play and innovation. Now, one of my most favorite things for students to do is play in the classroom. And when I say play, I mean with different materials and media. So, for example, sometimes I'll just take out different materials like bins, sit them out in front of the class, and show students what they can do. So, for example, this is a really good day. I like to kind of play with ink. So for example, I took out, the liquid ink. I took out some ink pens. I took out some bubbles, some spray bottles, some alcohol, some salt, some sticks, right? And I actually encouraged them to go out and scavenge a few things that they could bring in and actually do different things with the ink. So one student brought in a rock and they did some stamping. A student brought in some blades of grass and they did some drawing with the grass. So it was a full day of play before we actually started a project. And this was, I should mention, was done with my AP class. But even my other classes, like my Draw Paint 1 or 2, I'll have days where we more so kind of play and kind of see what the material does. Another good medium to do this with might be watercolor, because there are so many different things you can do with just watercolor. For example, if you use a watercolor pencil and sandpaper and you sand that down onto a wet sheet of paper, it will dissolve and give you a really kind of a cool like sand kind of like texture, which could be really interesting to experiment with. The arts definitely promote confidence, right? So if you're thinking about putting artwork on display in the hallway, or if you are submitting student work for competitions and awards, when they do win, or even if they get an honorable mention or something like that, or just the fact that they were brave enough to submit their work, definitely calls for a shout out, right? So whether that's putting it out in email, do an email all if your principal allows that, just saying, please congratulate this student for submission into blah, blah, blah. Or if you put the work up, like at my school, we have a TV that we can put visuals and information on. That way everybody can see, what's going on in the classroom, or if you want to highlight a particular student, you can do that during that time. Or even if it's in the announcements, whether it's on the morning announcements or whether it's on like a TV announcement, like my school does, a broadcasting that they release once a month, where you can submit information about different things going on in the classroom. So if you have any ideas on how you impact students, or maybe you have impacted students through the arts, please feel free to join me on the high school 2D art community and join in the discussion about different ways we can brainstorm together about impacting future students, any questions you have or anything like that. Again, my name is Sahira Dean. I'm the virtual PLC lead for high school 2D art. Thank you for tuning in.